In regards to dealing with public speaking, for example, speaking in group chat or speaking on Zoom, this is the cognitive therapy approach, CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy. So the first thing to think about is called appraisal style. Appraisal means how you assess the situation afterwards. So think about your appraisal style. So say if you talk in public or online or wherever it is, and it doesn't go as good as you can either decide to be supportive towards yourself or judgmental. So the phrase that's very powerful in cognitive therapy is, you learn from your mistakes, not judge. So you think to yourself, I will learn from any mistakes I make instead of judging myself. And I'll be supportive towards myself and compassionate towards myself. You become your own coach. So if you're speaking in public, you're speaking online in front of your colleagues, it doesn't go as well as you think. Afterwards, you think to yourself, okay, I'll learn from that and I'll do better next time. And this helps you to feel better. It helps you to boost your self-esteem. It also helps you to feel more calm and much better about the next time you're going to speak in front of others. So that's called appraisal style. And just really think about what's the most helpful way to talk to yourself after any situation. Talk to yourself as if you're talking to your own best friend. Talk to yourself as if you're talking to your own best friend, showing compassion, support. That I learn from my mistakes and I apply them to the future instead of judging. So having a more healthy appraisal style is much better. So for example, you have example A. One person speaks in public, they get a bit nervous, they fluff their words, and then after the situation they're judging themselves. I'm such an idiot. Why did I do that? People are thinking really badly of me. And then of course next time they have to speak in front of others, they're even more stressed. And that's not good. Sure it isn't. Now example B, the same thing happens. They fluff their words a bit, they get a bit nervous. But afterwards they think to themselves, I did my best, I will learn from this, instead of judging myself. And I know other people aren't thinking as much about me as I think they are. And that's a better way to look at things, isn't it? And it also means in example B, next time they have to speak in front of people, they have a much more healthy way of appraising the situation. So think about what's the useful way to think and feel. What is the most useful way to think and feel? Now, of course, these habits are not always easy to download new ways of thinking and feeling. It's through trial and effort. It's repeating a more healthy, useful appraisal style. Eventually, this becomes a habit. So you have to have patience with this. But like any habit, in the same way you learn something, you can unlearn it. The second magic phrase is, you're not your thoughts, you're not your feelings. Not every thought and not every feeling is accurate. And sometimes we think we're thinking, but we're not. We're just repeating a pattern that we learned in the past. So if you feel anxiety or any insecurity when you go to speak, just remind yourself that's just a thought. It's just a feeling. Of course, it's not a comfortable thing. The other magic phrase is to learn to become more comfortable with the uncomfortable feeling. So remind yourself to become more comfortable with the uncomfortable feeling. And then when you're speaking, you focus outwards. Focus on what you're saying. Focus on the content of what you're saying. Because any anxiety or fear is trying to get you to focus inwards. Focus on the feelings in your body. Your heart may race, you may have adrenaline in your body, you may feel tension. So instead of paying attention to these emergency signals, you practice focusing outwards on what the other person is saying and the content of what you're saying. And this tells your nervous system not to listen to those responses in your body, the nervous or stress response. Of course, this isn't easy. It takes practice. So sometimes people think you have to feel confident and calm when speaking in public in front of others. And that's not the case. Some of the best speakers in the world feel anxious beforehand. The trick is not to listen to the anxiety. And this takes away its power. So if you think to yourself in the future, if I feel anxious, if I feel insecure, if I have those negative thoughts, that's okay. They're just thoughts, they're just feelings. You have easily 50,000 thoughts a day. You're going to practice not listening to them. You practice letting them float away like a cloud. It's the thoughts that you pay attention to. They're the ones that give you power. And over time, as you practice focusing outwards on what you're saying and working through your anxiety, your confidence will grow. Your self-esteem will grow. The other mistake sometimes people make in cognitive therapy is called mind reading. And this is called a cognitive distortion. Cognitive means thinking. Distorted means a distorted way of thinking, an unhelpful way. And ask yourself the question, can you read minds? Can you tell what someone else is thinking all the time? And the answer is no. Mostly. But when we're stressed and in these situations, we can often start thinking what the other person is thinking in a negative way. And 90% or 95 or 98% of the time, they're not thinking as much about you as you think they are. They're focusing much more on what they're saying. So by recognizing if your mind reading in that negative way, it helps you not to listen to it because it's a distorted way of thinking. Now sometimes the reality of a situation, maybe they are thinking that way, but that's life. That's the way things go. And sometimes they may think a negative thing about you, and then 2 minutes later, 10 minutes later, they're thinking about their lunch. They're not thinking about it anymore. So the practice is, in a kind of practical way, is to think less about what other people are thinking about you and care less about it in a way. Let go of the idea of judgment, because this helps you to become more confident in what you're saying and confident in yourself. All these things are habits that take time and effort, but over time you will learn to change how you feel and think when speaking in public. These techniques have been tested and trialed many times, and there's many studies showing how powerful they are to reprogram your nervous system. So you don't repress your thoughts or feelings. You practice recognizing that they're just thoughts and feelings. You practice letting them go, listening to them less and less, focusing outward on what you're saying, focusing on the contents of what you're saying, focusing on what the other person is saying. And after any situation, appraising it in a way that's constructive for you, learning as opposed to judging, and letting go of what others are thinking about you. Over time, new habits are created with repetition and reinforcement. And of course, like learning any new habit, it can seem like it's a little bit of a battle between the old way of thinking and the new way of thinking. So it's not always easy to do, but try and do it in a gentle way. Realize it's a process. Every time you practice the new habit, those neural pathways in your brain get stronger. The pathways actually get deeper and more familiar. And every time you let go of the old ways, let them flow through you, they get weaker. And with time and effort, you create a new habit.